So I'm gonna continue off with where Harley ended with the review. Do you guys have any questions about the editing process and revision?
Can we just go over a citation of that?
Yeah,
'Cause
so
that's
I'm
where
gonna do
he got me
citations,
there.
but is everyone ready to jump into citations? No issues with structuring or editing?
Yeah.
Okay. So with citations, I'm gonna do a brief overview, and then we'll do a few exercises from the citation packet that he gave you a couple of weeks ago.
Okay.
So for some general rules, we have the rules with abbreviations. You abbreviate the terms for your case name, and you can use the tables in the Blue Book. First off, to do your citations, carry your Blue Books. Use it, it'll be handy throughout the whole process. And so you can use Table 6 and Table 10. And as a general rule, if you cite the case name, say for instance in your explanation section, in the sentence you include in Zane, and you underline Zane, then you don't have to include the full case name at the end in the citation, so you wouldn't put the full cite for Zane. So as a general rule, if the case name appears in the text of your sentence, only abbreviate a few common things. And you can use pages 91, depending on the edition. If you have the 19th edition, use page 91 to help you with abbreviations, and page 98. For this paper, we're underlining all the case names, so that's gonna be a general principle all throughout your paper. Make sure that all your citations are underlined, and you underline the case name up until the comma. So the comma is not underlined, but if you're using id, the period is underlined. With spacing, if you have single letters and numbers, you don't put spaces between the periods. So for instance, if you have, let me try to write this on the board.
So you said that the period in it is?
Is underlined.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And so with the spacing, as a rule, you don't put spaces in between the periods when it comes to the reporter. So if you have Northeastern Reporter, you have a period, no space, N period, E period, 2D. You only have a space at the end before you put in the page number, say 302, and you would only have a space before the reporter to start it off with, say, 91. So the only spaces in your citation would be right before the reporter. The reporter has no spaces in between, no spaces after the periods, a space, and then the page. I'll go back around.
So that's the page where it starts on, then you do the pin.
Right, so that's the page that it starts on, and what you would do, say for pinpoints, you would put a comma after the page that it starts on, a space, and then the pin site, the pin page.
Okay.
With the court names, so that's something that I always forget to do, and I have to go back to the Blue Book to remember. If it's ambiguous, if the report is ambiguous as to what state the decision was made, you have to include the state, the abbreviation for the state in the parentheses with the year. So if you have, let's continue with this same example. The Northeastern Reporter, we don't know what state this decision was made. So we would have to include May 2012. But if we're using New York, right, for this case. So if you have a citation that's 35, you have your space. I'm gonna put in the space.
Then what's
Just
the
so you can remember.
35? The volume?
The volume.
Okay.
This is, so you always have the
I get
volume,
the-
your
yeah.
space, the reporter, the space, the page.
Mhm.
If it's ambiguous, you put the parentheses with the state, the abbreviation for the state and the year.
Okay.
And because we can already tell from this that it's gonna be New York, the decision was made in New York, we don't have to include the state, we can just include the year.
Okay.
And you would have a space here. Okay.
He was telling me, like, me and the whole app, the appellate division, and it's
Mhm.
like, so, it will say, when I would like look up the cases, almost all of them said appellate division at the top, so
Yeah, he told me not to use those.
the app did.
Yeah, he said not to use the above and use like the supplement.
Yeah, because this makes it so much easier for you to know, as the reader, the reader automatically knows what state it's in. It's in the third department, for instance, so you wouldn't have to do too much, like, as a reader, you wouldn't have to do too much to figure it out and find out where this decision came down from.
Okay.
So it's, and as a general principle, I think it's best you keep it uniform throughout your paper. So if you're using the state, specified citation for your, paper, you start off that way. It's best to keep it going, keep it uniformed, as opposed to jumping between one that includes the state and another one that's ambiguous, so using the appellate one.
Yeah.
It's best to just keep it simplified and make it easier for the reader. Your whole goal, your whole purpose with the paper is to make sure that the reader can easily understand what your argument is, the cases, what the cases have to do with your argument, and then to be able to, even as a reader, figure out whether or not it's credible, and so you know that it's binding because it's in this jurisdiction.
Okay.
It makes it so much easier for the reader. So as another rule, when you're doing pinpoint citations, be sure when you include quotations, that you use pinpoint citations, like you have to use it because you're quoting someone, you're quoting whatever is written, and you wanna make sure that they can easily find that exact quote. So you wanna include what page it came from. And with the page numbers, so say you, with your rules, you used quotes or a general rule from 2 to 3 different pages, or you just summarize something from 2 to 3 different pages into one sentence, then you have to use, let's do the page numbers here. You have to include all the pages, and so that the best way to do it without taking up too much space and to be more concise, as a rule, you include, say for instance, let's continue with, and there's no erase, okay, 51. We're starting from page 302. Our quote came from 305, but it continued on into the next page over. This has 3 digits, so we know it's gonna be 305 to 306. Instead of writing 305-306, we just put 305-06. And then you can continue on with whatever year. And so, if the page number has 3 or more digits, you just drop any repetitive digits other than the last 2 digits. So even if you have 1055, and your quote continues on to 57, you only keep 57. Okay. I wanted to go on into signaling because I think that's really useful for this particular paper. You have 5 cases that apply to your issue. limit to cite every single case, brief every single case, including your explanation or application. But what you can do is use the signals to reinforce some of the arguments that you're making. So with signaling, you use signals to indicate how a cited authority relates to a proposition in the text. So your signals include C generally. You have but C, compare, I think that's it, contra, which is contradictory, but C, and then but CF. And so most of the time, like for this paper, you're probably gonna end up using C and C generally for some of your arguments to reinforce them. And with using C and C generally, we're gonna look at Rule 1.4.
Sheila, just a quick question.
Mm-hmm.
When you use it, is that the period underlined? I can't remember.
Yes.
It is, okay.
So with it, the period is underlined. With the case name, the comma isn't.
Oh, I'm sorry. My mind's like three different places.
Oh, don't worry.
Civil procedure in the term.
Okay, so C and C generally are supportive signals, and you use them, and even in example, you can also use that when you're doing and there's no eraser either. This is fun. So say for instance, you cited a case, you quoted a case, or you made an argument, and you use Zane, right? So your argument was based on Zane, and now you've written whatever the text was, whatever. That's your writing, not the actual quote. And so you use C, you underline it. You underline C the same way you would underline the case name. And then, what's another case that you used?
Mitchell?
And you put the full case name. Because you haven't used this case already. If you have used this case in another part of your paper, you can just do the
ID?
short, not ID, the short,
C. Mitchell.
yeah, the short site. So this would be if you've mentioned Mitchell in the explanation, the first explanation, now you're in your second explanation paragraph. You've already used Mitchell before in another argument. You just wanna emphasize this particular argument. But Zane is a stronger case to use for this argument. You use Mitchell just to support it as a backup. And so you would, Mitchell, the usual way, you don't underline the comma, and then you include the citation for Mitchell. You can also do a parenthetical. And so you wanna be able to explain why you're using Mitchell. If you haven't mentioned, like you haven't delved into Mitchell in the previous paragraph, for the reader to know why you're using this to support your argument with Zane, then you use the parenthetical just to explain yourself. So C. Mitchell, the court quoting another case, or the court decided, so deciding or ruling, whatever it is. So what is it that why are you using this signal? You wanna be able to explain it in a parenthetical. You can use C generally. underline C. Generally is also underlined. There is a space between C and generally, and that's not underlined. And then, was there another case with Corbett?
No, it's like bunker versus Texas.
Okay, bunker. C generally, bunker V, whatever. And that's if bunker wasn't used before. And because you're saying generally, you don't necessarily have to put the parenthetical. If you want to put a parenthetical where you're explaining what the court decided and why you're using it, you wanna make sure that you keep it short and concise, so your parenthetical should be straightforward.
How many words is applicable?
There's no rule on how many words, but.
Well, no, but you know what I mean, like what, obviously it's like ruling of a successful IID case, or do you wanna be more specific than that?
It depends.
Ruling outrageous conduct?
I think that's a little bit too broad. Because we can tell that that's the issue and that's why you would probably be using it. But you can say, you can mention facts, specific facts that are similar to your case. Or,
Ruling insulting language or, threatening actions
Yeah.
were outrageous.
court found threatening actions were outrageous, or where defendant, dug a grave across in his yard was outrageous, intolerable, or something like that. Right, so it has to, you have to specify why you're using these cases. But when you're using C generally, you can include the case name, short site or full site, depending on whether or not I was using another part of your paper before. And, with generally, you don't necessarily have to include the parenthetical, but it is useful. And I do recommend you use parentheticals when you're doing the signals, because it makes it so much easier for the reader to know why you're using it to support your argument. You can, with signals, C generally, bunker V, whatever, semicolon, Zane, semicolon, and you can use a cluster of cases to be able to reinforce your argument, if that's the issue, if that's what ends up happening. If you find multiple cases that have one common ground, you can cluster them, but then I would also recommend you do the parenthetical to explain why you're clustering them. Because if they're all about IIUD, why are you using it? So that's pretty much it for signals. Word space, what's behind here?
So can you use a parenthetical with a C generally?
Yes,
Okay.
you can. But, I mean, you're
So-
saying C generally, just read through a case and you might find something that has where the court spent so much time arguing on this one particular point that they could just read through a case and.
What's stronger, the parenthetical reference or the general? Like, if you had a choice between the two,
Parentheticals,
are stronger? Okay.
that's in my opinion, you use the parentheticals because it tells the reader straight on why you're using this, why it supports your argument, your previous sentence. You use C generally if there's one case that all throughout supports your argument, and so you wanna include it to buff your argument up. But if there are specific facts and specific details from a case, use the parentheticals. So we're gonna go over a few, practice problems for signals.
Is this video posted on YouTube or something?
Yes. Hopefully, it's recording. Boston University law students are the most motivated students in the country. That's the argument. You have C example. Okay. Yes, so they use multiple pages in that one. Law Students Association versus Association of American Law Schools, they have the site for that. And then there's the parenthetical court found that all law students are lacking in motivation because their tuition is too high. And then you have Contra. Let's see if I have any. Let me see if I can pull another. Sorry. Okay, so how would you do a parenthetical or this case? And you can just come up with whatever you want to include in the parenthetical. So if you wanted to use this for a signal, Randolph and the mens rea for the crime of providing material resources to a foreign terrorist organization. And that's a law review article. Have you guys done practice on secondary?
Yeah. What secondary would Roberta?
Or do you want to just do case names? Okay. We'll stick to the case names. Goodrich. We'll do Goodrich and printable. So Goodrich v. Department of Public Health. And you have multiple pages. It starts from 941 and it has pinpoints for 949 and just 949. That's where the quote is. There's also another reporter that's used. So do we have a volunteer who wants to?
What's 440 on that one?
Oh, 440 is the volume 4 mass, the mass reporter. So if you're writing a paper similar to yours, which would you use? For the reporter, let's start from there. Sorry?
798.
And why?
Well, that's from the main reporter. I don't know exactly what the mass one is for.
Well, the mass is, it's from, like that automatically tells you it was decided in Massachusetts. So say for instance, you're writing a paper for, and you want someone to know that the decision is already in Massachusetts.
Yeah.
You can do sites both ways. You can use the Northeastern Reporter, but you have to include the mass.
Yeah, because it doesn't say, okay, yeah, because it doesn't say, like in there, you wouldn't know it was from that, it's just by looking at it.
So, we'll write out both sites. What's gonna be the full site? Full site for Goodrich. Goodrich,
Department of Public Health.
DEPT,
Of public health.
is there a period after?
Yeah.
Public is spelled out?
Yeah.
Oh,
We underline it. Put the comma outside the underline.
So comma outside the underline, okay. For ambiguity. So Northeastern Reporter.
798.
798. Right, uh-huh.
NE 2D. And the starting page, yes, please.
Starting page is 941.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the pin site, where is it?
Is it 949 is the pin site?
949. Now, what if you were using it up until, from 949 to 952?
Then you do dash
Dash.
52.
So dash 52. Now, since this is Northeastern Reporter, do we have to add anything afterward?
Year.
A year, anything with it?
You gotta say which date it is. You have to put mass, right?
Yeah. And the years,
52, right? Yeah.
yeah.
So in here, when me and him had the meeting, he was saying, because you don't have to put, obviously, New York, because it's the
Mhm.
New York, border. or
Right.
whatever it's called. But he was telling me to put active for appellate division in there.
Yeah, afterwards.
With
when
the
we
year
say-
inside of there, because you have to let him know that that's.
Right, that was appellate level decision.
Okay, so you know
Yeah.
that by, that's just the decision, where the decision was. like,
Right, so you
okay.
wanna put in that it was appellate.
Okay, alright, yeah, that's what I was.
But not the appellate report, is what he's.
Yeah,
right.
that's what we were.
Because you're
Yeah,
not
that's
using the
right,
appellate
yeah.
reporter, you were using the state,
Yeah.
so they knew what jurisdiction it was, what state it was, but they didn't know what level of the court it was.
Yeah.
So you had to put the appellate division,
Okay,
in the parentheses. But if you wanted to, so this is ambiguous, and so you had to insert the state name in the parentheses. If you wanted to cite it using the Mass Reporter, you would have 440. Mass. If you don't mind. And we start from 316. But if we went on to 982, dash,
just to page 982?
Yeah.
To dash 982.
okay, so you put the full page number because
It's a different, yeah.
it starts with a different number. Sorry, that's the period. And then we would include the year, so. 2013. Okay, so what about printable? Everyone wanna come up and do printable?
Yeah.
You're my hero.
Thanks, Chad.
You're welcome.
should have known when I
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Why'd you take out the G?
I don't know. I thought that would be. I just looked at the top one. I was kind of just looking at the last one, maybe. But that's, yeah.
Where does the 1285 come in?
That was
That is
just the
the
pin
page.
side that I gave him, like the page.
Oh,
where-
okay, yeah.
Yeah, but in general,
You
the
would-
question was without the pin side.
So you would wanna put, there would be a D right there.
Um,
I just didn't because I thought we just are just letting them know which state it was decided in. That's,
right, but you also wanna you want them to know what level of the court.
okay. Yeah,
So you would still keep D,
okay.
that way they know it's the district court level. Cause this is so ambiguous,
Yeah, it is.
Like,
Yeah.
no one's gonna know what level it is in the court system.
So there's really not much of a difference between the two, so really insight, right?
Right.
Okay.
But you can, if you wanted to do a signal using the two, so this was your actual, case that you use for your argument. If you wanted to use this for a signal, how would you do so? See?
And we already used printable before, we're saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
So you had already used both, but your last sentence is using this and you wanted to use printable to reinforce your argument, or there's a certain inference you're making from your argument that applies to.
C, printable.
So underline C,
Yeah.
and then
Would it be generally or no, you going directly from it?
you can use either or.
Alright. C. Printable. Pringles.
And.
Mhm.
Will there be a comma after, right?
Okay.
Not underlined? Do I? It wouldn't, I have written down like under the bunker one, it'd be bunker V, but it wouldn't be, it would just be printable?
You can do bunker.
But we, she's saying we
whatever,
already
but-
used printable, so we don't have to.
Yeah, you
Oh,
already used
okay.
it.
So, still do.
Then you do the 304,
Mhm.
it's like the same thing, but you don't do the 1285, right?
Yeah.
So it's, okay, yeah.
So 12:45 is where the case starts.
Yeah, so that's all you need.
But since you already used it, you may not necessarily even need to include all this.
Oh, great.
You can just,
Unless it was a different page number that you were.
right, unless you wanted to do 12:46.
Mhm.
Because you've already done the full site in the previous portion.
And just like, if it was the appellate division, instead of Hawking 2003, it would be active 2003.
Yeah. Or actually, know,
So you have to look that up in the blue book.
right.
Okay.
Do you guys have any other questions?
No, that helped a lot.
Yeah, that's big.
Citations, right?
Yeah,
Use
you-
your blue book like for signals.
Yeah.
And all throughout your citations, just double check with the rules. I think citations are counted for 5 points, or is it 10?
But how many?
I don't know.
It's
He was-
towards your.
Yeah, he was saying like format and all that stuff too, so I
Yeah.
think that kind of messed a little bit, you know what I mean? When
Right.
It was messing kind of the whole format up of everything too.
I just feel like the blue book is like, it's so thick and I feel like there's so many different pages. Like, is there anywhere in particular that we should focus on? 'Cause I feel like one thing will tell me one thing, the next section will tell me something else.
So use, I don't have mine with me, but what I would recommend is you tab it. So use the
Yeah.
smaller post-its, the tabbings, and you tab the most common, like the important ones, the ones that you use commonly. So table 1, table 6, table 10, use, sorry,
And on the PowerPoints that we had.
the abbreviation sections.
Yeah.
The signals, tab that page, that way you can easily flip through it and find the rule there, and it'll help you, figure out how to cite correctly. But you tab what's common, what's most important, and you already know you'll be using a lot of Massachusetts courts, so if you can find the tabbing for the Massachusetts court citation, like the
Okay.
abbreviations for all their court system, their court names. Federal courts, you wanna tab those also.
Yeah.
And that is about it. Do you guys have any questions about the paper in general?
No, that item was big for me.
Okay.
Thank you.
No problem. Spend it, like, take your time with citation. It's annoying.
Yeah, that's the way to
It's
put it.
tedious. But, and it's gonna hurt your eyes after a while, but you'll get used to it, and soon you'll be able to cite, you'll get the principles generally. You'll be able to cite much easier without using the blue book.
How do we get to this if we wanna like go back and like look at this video or something? Is it?
It should be posted on the YouTube page.
Okay, is that on trend? How is that?
We can email the link once it's posted,
Okay.
and I think the YouTube page includes all the previous.
Yeah, I watched one of them, so I know I've
Okay.
been to it, I just can't, I mean, I'm sure it's on Twin somewhere.
Okay. All right, well, if you guys have no more questions.
No, that's it,
Thanks,
thank
Sharon.
you.
You're welcome. Now, how do I turn this off?